I was diagnosed with autism at 31. How were things then, and how are they today? Hi friends, my name is Claire and this is my channel, Woodshed Theory. Here, I make content about what it is like to live as an adult on the autism spectrum and whatever else feels good to me. So if that sounds good to you, or if you're feeling particularly gracious today, and I hope that you are, please go ahead and click the subscribe button, ring the bell. I almost forgot to mention that I put out videos a few times a week. Click the like and the share. I'm impressed with myself every time I get through that. Many of my followers and viewers are late diagnosed autistic adults. I thought it might be interesting to talk about my life pre-diagnosis at age 31 and what my life looks like now compared to when I was an undiagnosed 30-year-old adult. There's a misconception about autism. Number one, that adults can't have autism, that it's something that you grow out of, or that it can be cured out of you. But no, adults can, will, do have autism, and it's not something that you grow out of. You have it for your entire life. It's how your neurology in your brain is mapped out. If you're not autistic, or maybe even if you are autistic, you may be wondering how it was possible that I could go 31 years without knowing that I was on the autism spectrum. I've addressed this in other videos, but basically, I mean, it wasn't for lack of trying. Throughout my life, efforts were made to figure out what was going on with me, why I was the way I was, to give me some help, and it just so happens that I was a child and an adolescent and a teenager during a time where they weren't diagnosing autism in girls. That's it. That's why I didn't know about my autism. Fast forward to age 31, I was watching a YouTube video about a woman who was late diagnosed, TED Talk. I'll try and link it down below if I remember. When I was listening to her, I was shocked. I was taken aback because it sounded exactly like me. Yeah, that's totally me. Hold up, wait a minute. What the heck? And of course, at that point, I went into the autism spiral for information. And the more information I consumed, the more I was so positive that I was on the autism spectrum. Nothing else had ever fit the way that diagnosis fit. Nothing else even came close to it. Reading the diagnostic criteria, reading about other people's experiences, reading the diagnostic attributes in women was like reading my own biography. Needless to say, I was shocked. I was emotional. It took me a while to get over it. I made the personal decision to get a formal diagnosis. At the time, I was able to do that, and I'm very happy that I did. It was extremely validating for me. But what was I like before my diagnosis, before you knew me? And what am I like now? I thought I could go through a few things. It's not an exhaustive list, obviously, but maybe it might be helpful for some people to hear what I was like as an undiagnosed person in my view, and how that's changed and what I'm like today. Another way to put this is what I was struggling with before my diagnosis and how those struggles have changed up until the current moment. My life is a process, right? The first thing I wanted to talk about was relationships. Before my diagnosis, I really struggled with friendship. I remember the diagnostician asking me about friends and telling him that I always felt like other people had best friends except for me. Like close personal friendships were not something that I was able to keep as a constant in my life. There were times in my life where I would get close to one person, like have a very close friend, but then eventually that friendship would, I don't want to say fade, but if I moved out of the area or on with my life somewhere else, I was not able to maintain that friendship and that relationship because out of sight, out of mind. And honestly, I didn't know what I was doing wrong. It wasn't necessarily the other person. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. It was fairly similar with dating relationships. I would meet someone, they would become my special interest. I would spend all of my time and thought processes on that person because I wanted to be in a relationship so badly. Definitely not the healthiest way to go about things. I don't suggest that. So just in general, my relationships were too intense or non-existent. I felt like there was a one-sidedness to them where I felt that people didn't relate to me. And I obviously didn't relate to other people, so I didn't know what I was doing wrong. How has that changed today? Well, since my autism diagnosis, I've put a lot of work into being a better friend and understanding human relationships in a better way. Not only with how I relate to neurotypicals, but also with how I relate to other autistic people. One of the most common comments that I get on the channel is that autistic people struggle with friendship. How do I make friends? How do I maintain friends? What am I doing wrong? And for me, I had to learn to, one, identify how I best relate to people. For example, I might not be a friend who calls, but I can be a friend who remembers to text you every few days and check in and see how you're doing. Also, that I need to put the work in and develop relationships before I expect there to be an immediate closeness. Relationships take time to foster and develop. There are levels to relationships that I wasn't really aware of before. I was the kind of person, and sometimes still struggle with oversharing, jumping in too fast. So that has changed, I think, a lot. I'm more careful with who I allow into my life, and I understand that I have to put the work in and that not every friendship is equal. So if we're not close friends, I don't have to give everything to that friendship. I don't have to focus on one person at a time. There's so many things that I've learned and that have improved since learning I was on the autism spectrum and knowing that's where those social issues were stemming from. Another thing I wanted to talk about was mental illness. Before I was diagnosed with autism, I was diagnosed with OCD and started medication and treatment. It was really severe. I feel that it's something that I might always struggle with, but I have come so far, 95% better than it used to be, and it was bad. It took up hours and hours of my thought processes, hours and hours of my day. I was hyper vigilant. I was not easy to work with because I was a perfectionist at things. I was constantly anxious. I was constantly in my own head. I was sick. So before my autism diagnosis, I started working on that aspect of my life, not knowing if things could get better, but hoping they could. And I've put the work in and things have gotten a lot better. I have a lot of videos on my OCD journey. So if that's something that you're struggling with, just know it's a very, very common comorbidity, which means it's common for people with autism to have OCD. So just know that you're not alone and that there's hope. Another difference that I can definitely notice is that I always knew that I was different, but I attributed at the time my differences to other things because I didn't know I had autism. I just thought that I was super creative, quirky. I'm still those things, but I was proud a lot of times of being different, but then also I desperately wanted to fit in somewhere. And even when I had friend groups, felt left out. Now I know that I wasn't really actually being left out. I just wasn't able to relate to people at that time, and that has definitely changed. But a lot of the way that I was dressing to be different because I was different, or acting, or the groups I was trying to fit into, a lot of those things I thought the reason that I was different was not because of autism, because I didn't know about it, but because things like I was very religious. I was different in that way. I was super creative and wore crazy clothes. I wanted to be the best at everything, and that made me different, better. I had a high opinion of myself. And you know what? I'm not super proud about that, and it's not easy for me to talk about, but I'm talking about it because I know other people who relate diagnosed go through this. I thought that the problem was others and that I was doing everything that I needed to do. Why weren't people rising up to meet me? When in fact, the issue was that I had a neurological disorder where I struggle to communicate and relate to other people, and I was different because of that. How are things different now? Well, I think this would be a good time to talk about learning to be my unmasked self. For the first time in my life, I have really focused on who I am as a person, what I like doing, what I'm good at, what I enjoy, and I don't care about, well, that's not fair because I used to not care about what other people think, but I really did. I was portraying that I didn't care, but I did care because I really wanted to fit in somewhere. And I would skip scap around to different groups trying to find my place, and I just wasn't finding it. Now I have a completely different view, and I'm happy to just spend some time figuring out me and who I am and what I like and what I want to do and what's good for me. It's hard, but it's completely worth it. So I'm happy that that change has happened. Behaviors. This is just like a wide-ranging topic, but I definitely have noticed a change in my behaviors. A lot of that is because of all of the OCD treatment and work that I did. As far as the autism diagnosis, I feel that I used to be a judgmental person. Even though it wasn't my intention to be judgmental, I can say that I felt like I felt highly of myself. I thought highly of myself because I thought that everyone else was getting it wrong and I was getting it right, and I found that annoying. Again, this is not easy for me to talk about. I'm not proud of it. This is just how I felt. I think a lot of people would have found me annoying because of this. I had a very high standard and I didn't work well with others. So if you were in a position where you had to work with me, I would try to hold you to my high standard, and then if that was not possible, which how could it be possible? I was very emotional, very reactive. I felt that I didn't have control of my emotions as much. I wasn't as trustworthy, and of course that affected my relationships, mostly because I had trouble not sharing information with the people I was around. So if somebody asked me to keep something private, that would be very difficult for me to do because I would feel the need to confess it to other people, or at least it would give me a great deal of anxiety to hold on to things that I was asked to keep private, but I couldn't. I think now that has changed considerably, and I love it. It's very freeing not to have to share everything that's going on with my mind, not to have to seek reassurance. It's very freeing to know that because of my autism, I communicate differently than other people, and now I can relate to people better because of that. I see people through a different lens now than I used to, and that's awesome. I also feel much more in control of my anxiety levels. I never thought that I had anxiety, and now looking back, I'm like, I mean, if there was a scale of 1 to 10, my anxiety would have been at a 12 at all times. And that's just the reality that I was living in. Now I still struggle with anxiety, but nothing like I did before I was diagnosed. And a lot of that is because of the diagnosis and the knowledge of who I am. Because of that, I'm able to monitor my feelings, my sensory input, my emotions so much better, and life is just better because I know I'm autistic. I could talk about so many things, but I guess we'll end it with, I used to be super aloof, perhaps. I felt that if I exuded the perfect behavior, the right clothes, the right whatever, that would attract people to me. And they would want to be friends or whatever with me. Because of my autism diagnosis, today I know that there are other ways to relate to people. It's not super common for someone to just think you're mysterious and ooh, they spend a lot of time alone. I wonder, they're so deep. But you know, it's weird to talk about now, but I feel like I was more like that in the past. And now I do feel like I'm more willing to put in the effort to have relationships. Because of my autism diagnosis, I have pushed myself to be social, but in a different way than I was being social when I was autistic, where I was pushing myself to show up, be a social butterfly, talk to everyone, fit in, even though in reality I was kind of on the outskirts of everything at all times. So now I feel that has changed a lot, and I am able to meet my own sensory needs and take breaks if I need to, and have real and more direct conversations and listen to people. Yeah. Overall, being diagnosed, or if you can't get a formal diagnosis, knowing that you're autistic through self-diagnosis is so important. It's transformative. It just gives you a sense of self, and I highly recommend it. It's hard to sift through everything. I look at the person who I was when I was 30, and I see someone who was constantly pushing, constantly trying to get somewhere, to a place of understanding, to a place of peace. And since my diagnosis, I've been able to find that. And I wholly contribute that to, one, getting help for my mental illness, but mostly because I know better now how my brain works and what I'm working with. I have peace for the first time. So even though my life is totally different, I'm just so happy. And I don't think that I've ever been this happy. And for a long time, even when I thought I was happy, there was a hollowness to it because I just felt like something was off. And now I can really have those feelings and understand them better. So, what about you? I know this is kind of a deep topic, but I wanted to share what my personal experience was, what I have learned, what I have accomplished in my mind, who I've become, and also who I was. What did I act like? How did I present myself pre-autism diagnosis? I was a totally different person. Totally different. I would love to know in the comments, was this your experience as well if you're late diagnosed? Was it a shock for you that brought you through kind of a journey of how you were, and have you had positive changes? Because I can't think of really any negative changes that I've had. No, I honestly can say I'm a better person now because I know I'm autistic as opposed to not knowing. I hope you have a wonderful day. Be kind to yourself. You are worthy. You deserve good things. All right, guys, see you next time.